Welcome to this week's episode of the FarrCast, Chips and the Teflon. Our special guest is Leland Vittert, news anchor for News Nation. Michael and Leland talk about Leland's new book, Born Lucky. Market insight this week from Kenny Polcari, who remains cautious, and Michael dives into the shutdown with our political analyst, Dan Mahaffee. Now let's kick off the show with your host, Michael Farr.
Welcome to the FarrCast. I am Michael Farr. It is October the 2nd. Here we go. We're in the fourth quarter of 2025. It's been a good year, folks. It's been a great year, folks. Markets are making new all-time highs. People believe in it because the valuations are really high right now. Valuations are really high, so people are willing to pay a whole lot for a dollar in earnings. It's terrific, I guess. There's a great deal of optimism. People feel good about it, and I am cautious. You've been hearing me get cautious and more cautious. Stocks did well yesterday. In spite of a government shutdown, they're still positive this morning. NASDAQ futures are up 0.5% coming here into Thursday, and there doesn't seem much to dissuade the optimism and enthusiasm of investors. The price of oil, $61 a barrel. So there's no real sort of animal spirits out there in global economies thinking that things are going to be really growing enough to have a lot of demand for oil. On the other hand, gold is above $3,900 an ounce. $3,900 an ounce. I mean, that's a double in the last 3 years, 4 years, easy. 3 years, 4 years, double in the price of gold. So 100% return on the price of gold. Congratulations for those of you who participated. And if you listened to our guys like Urio or Barugian, they've been talking to me about precious metals for years for inflationary reasons. The 10-year Treasury has rallied and interest rates are now lower. They're coming back down, 410 right now on the 10-year Treasury. The optimism in markets is largely based on the cost of money. The projected cost of money. Will the Fed lower the cost of money? That's what happens when they lower rates. They make money cheaper to borrow, and when it's really cheap to borrow, people look up and go, oh, hell, I can certainly earn more than 3%, 2% somewhere. I'll take that money, I'll borrow it, I'll tell them I'll owe them their 2%, and I'm going to go invest it in something that pays me 5%, and I get the spread. Great. And maybe that's investing in a business, and maybe it's investing in a mortgage, and maybe there are a bunch of things out there you can invest in. They all won't work, but you can do it with other people's money at a certain price. We're going to watch what happens now through this shutdown. Greg Valliere says it's going to be at least the month of October. At least the month of October. This is not budging, and you can see that markets don't care, folks. Markets are not falling and dropping here. So we're going to watch all of this very closely. We've got Mahaffee coming up. In segment 3, we have on this show Leland Vittert. Leland Vittert is the author of the brand new book, Born Lucky. This is the former Fox anchor and News Nation anchor and senior Washington anchor for News Nation, who has the show On Balance every night. He has autism. He didn't speak for the first 3 years of his life. His father quit his job and went home every day to help figure out how to teach this little boy to deal with the world, who was very ill-equipped to deal with the world, and was so successful that this young man in his early 30s was able to be the war correspondent for Fox News in the Middle East. If you can imagine not being able to read people's reactions and understand the interpersonal relationships very well, and surviving as a war correspondent, this is an amazing story. And I cried 4 times when I read this book. It's a page-turner book of an autobiography. You're not going to believe it. Born Lucky. He's coming on, and he's also going to tell us. George Will wrote the foreword, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to when he comes on today. I want to talk to him about his childhood, and then I want to ask. He has great guests on his show every night. He claims the fairest show in television, a little bit leaning right, but great guests, great insights And it's so I've got lots of questions for him about what's going on in the world, particularly the Middle East, seeing that he was there. And we're going to start with my great friend, Kenny Polcari, Slate Stone Wealth Chief Market Strategist, the voice and face of Fox News. I think Maria's days are limited. Welcome back, Kenny Polcari.
Michael, thank you for having me back. I'm still thinking about the Leland Vittert conversation. I had no idea. I am going out to buy that book the minute you and I hang up on Amazon. I'm going to have it delivered right to my iPad so I can start reading it. It sounds like an amazing story.
It's an amazing story, and truly, I helped. I did a bunch of the edits. I changed the structure of the book at one point. He asked me, and I know his father, and I know the family, and I've only gotten to know him in the past 5 or 6 years. But having known the story and heard it from his father and heard it from his mother and talking to him, I still read it and I cried 4 different times and I laughed out loud a couple of days. It's just really powerful. So you're going to enjoy that, Kenny. I promise. I want you to meet him. I do when we get together. Kenny, I got the S&P 500 that made a new all-time high yesterday. Markets are making new all-time highs. I'm 24 times earnings right now. What does this mean?
It means I'm getting a little nervous just because the market does not want to take a breather at all. And yesterday, it's interesting. We got the government shutdown, and you and I both know this. You may get a short-term reaction, but the long-term means nothing for the market. But it was that ADP report that was a complete stunner to everybody, right? What was supposed to be a 50,000 new jobs created turned into negative 37,000 jobs. It was an 85,000 swing in the estimate to ADP. And that only fueled the narrative about the job market is probably softening quicker than expectations. And so now the narrative once again shifts to what's the Fed got to do now? And is 50 basis points back on the table at the next meeting, and that's what sent stocks higher.
I don't think they're listening to the Fed, Kenny. I know what Wall Street's saying, and they see at a weak number and go, "Oh, we want more." But the Fed's not saying that. The Fed says we want more time.
Correct. And so what I'm saying is now we're going to have this battle. What's the market telling us versus what's the Fed telling us? Because to your point, the last couple of days, we've heard a number of Fed heads come out talking about go slow, go slow, go slow. And then we get a stunner like yesterday. And look, we're not going to get Friday's NFP report because the government shut down. So that's going to be a piece of data that we don't get. And so now the market is betting. What's the Fed going to do? Are they going to have to make this leap of faith? Or are they going to stand
So what are they going to do?
No.
I got all that. So what are they going to do? I think the market's setting himself up to be disappointed.
I agree with you 100%. I think the market's saying no, and the Fed's going to put the brakes on, and I think that's when the market's going to get disappointed. Now, whether it happens today, tomorrow, or on October 27th when the Fed actually comes out, or the week before when Nikki Timmeros or Goldman Sachs comes out with a special report on why they can't or why they shouldn't, then I think the market will sit back. Because to your point, there's two different schools of thought. The market's saying 50 and the Fed's going, not so quick.
Yeah, listen to the Fed. Just listen to the Fed. Hey, listen, Nikki Timmeros is a great guy, by the way. He's a great guy. I know him very well. I talk to him frequently. But you talk to old Fed governors and they say, yeah, well, we have one more tool for jawboning, and it's the Wall Street Journal reporter. Nikki Timmeros is filling the chair right now. Nick is a good guy, but there's an understanding in place, I promise.
Yeah, so, I agree with you, 100%.
When he says it, listen, because the Fed's speaking just through a different channel.
Well, between him and Goldman Sachs, both of them I consider deep throats because I think the Fed uses both of them to kind of.
So here's the thesis I heard from one of our colleagues, and one that you and I respect a lot. And she didn't give me, I didn't ask permission to share or actually assign this thesis to her. So I'm going to tell you what she said. I had lunch with her this week. You know this person, this strategist, very, very successful and exceptionally bright. I mean, this woman's truly genius. So she says, she's at lunch with me, and she says, here's my theory. The next 2 years, you've got Trump money coming into this market. As he gets into the end of his, close to that third term, I think he could hit the brakes. I think you're going to have a new Fed chair. I think that you're going to have Congress that probably is starting to hedge its bets looking for the next term. But I think it's free and clear to own stocks for the next 2 years because of all of the government money coming in and the pressure on the Fed. What do you think, Farr? I said, I think you're out of your mind to say 2 years. Never put a timeline out there if you don't have to put a timeline out there. Is the wind at your back right now? Yes, but things in Washington can change in a matter of weeks, and they can change dramatically. So anybody who really wants to be wrong, start predicting things. And if you want to be really wrong, add a timeline. Add a timeline. So, and she heard me. I said that to her. And she heard me, and she said, but don't you think with rates coming down and all of this and that? And I said, listen, yes, I get it. But I can come up with some of the most cogent, intelligent-sounding, wonderful theses that really hold up that never happen. And don't hang your career out there on a tree limb for this one. She appreciated it, and she was kind of pissed off because I think I let too much air out of her. She just wanted me to tell her, of course, as most people do, that they're brilliant, and that's absolutely right, and go spend all your money that way. Well, I'm sorry, but that's how you maintain people's respect, when you tell them the truth. What do you think about what she said, and what do you think about my response?
I think your response was perfect, because I think it's a matter of, and you and I both know this because we've been in this business for 40 years. It's about being in the market. It's not about trying to time it in, out, you're in, you're out. You're in it for the long term. You have to make a balanced plan. You got to assess your risk. You have to understand what's going on. You don't make a decision on any one data point or any one headline. You take it all in point. But I think you are 100% right. I don't think that you should try to put a time frame on it or a limit on it. I think you can talk about trends and cycles and what you think is going to happen, but over the long term, the market has proven year in and year out to be
unpredictable.
Unpredictable.
And yet, Kenny, I didn't say she was wrong.
No, she's not wrong.
Was saying, right? I didn't say she was wrong in what she was saying. I just said don't limit yourself that way, and don't ever fall in love with your own theses of any minute of the day. So
right.
if we have this situation of a melt up and things are at all-time highs, Kenny, think back to the time for me when bubbles have burst. I keep going back to 87, okay? I keep going back to 87 because in August of 87, and you and I were there, the bond market fell apart 2 months before the stock market hit the skids, right?
Right.
And the bond market's always smarter. Bond market's rallying. You talk about what's different this time. We've got a Fed that's taken a very active hand in managing the economy. That wasn't the case 40 years ago. The Fed sat back on the sides. They said it's not our job to care about markets, and the market was not as big a part of the economy back then either. So what do you think about how we look for the next pullback? This is it's starting to feel bubbly to me, Kenny.
Well, listen, I thought it was bubbly 400 points ago. Right?
You weren't wrong.
No, as it kept rallying, I kept saying, look, it feels bubbly to me. It feels bubbly. But I was willing, and I still am willing. I'm invested. My clients are invested, just like yours are invested. You kind of manage that risk and you trim where you should, but that doesn't mean you jump out of the market. By the way, I should say, when this happened last time, you and I had dark hair. Today we got white hair, but I think that just speaks to our maturity and time in the business.
Sure,
but that means
yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, let me give you, and look, we got to go, but let me give you the real throw up question for guys like us.
Yep.
The 70-year-old client shows up today with their brand new inheritance of $2 million in cash. All they have is a pension and a $500,000 IRA retirement. They're 70. This is a huge windfall. What do you do? And what do you do when that person's 40 and shows up with $2 million in cash? And you're the guy. What are you going to do with it, Kenny?
So, well, listen, if you're 40 and you've got 30 or 40 years in front of you, then there's a whole different conversation about risk and about asset allocation and about how to put the money to work versus somebody who's 70.
Market's at all-time highs. You're going to buy, you're going to put all $2 million in the S&P 500 today?
Absolutely not. You would never do that. You wouldn't even do that if the market was near its lows either. You would
I might.
feather it in over time. You'd create a plan. You'd look for where the opportunities are. You wouldn't be chasing, like people ask me all the time, you're buying tech. No, I'm not buying tech. I'm not buying tech up here. We own it. We're participating. We've got certainly good money in it and profits in it, but we're looking at other places in the market where you're going to find opportunities for sectors that have been underperforming. Look at what happened to healthcare, right? It was a big underperformer. It's starting to lift its head up. Now, certainly there's been some strategy around it, Trump making deals with Pfizer and all that, but there was huge opportunity in healthcare. So some of the money would go to healthcare, some of the money would go to Staples, some of the money as a 70-year-old would go into more secure, treasury type stuff that's going to offer stability. But if you're 40 years old and you're coming with that kind of a conversation, it's going to be with those kind of assets at 40 coming in, it's going to be a different conversation because you've got much more time on your side.
So you're telling me, okay, so you're telling me that you're going to be cautious and you're going to try to be disciplined.
100%.
What do you do 6 months from now when the thing is 15% higher and you're still sitting on 70% cash?
Well, you have to continue looking for those opportunities, right? You have to take advantage because the market might be 15% higher, but different sectors within the market are not necessarily going to be 15% higher. That's where you have to find your opportunity, but it's all about making the plan. You have to have the plan. You have to understand what you're looking for. And when that happens, whether the market's 15% higher or not, when those opportunities present themselves, they present themselves. Look at that. Again, I'm going to point at healthcare. The market is up, 20% year to date, yet healthcare was flat on the year. And now it's lifting its head. Yes, there's been some strategy around it, but it's lifting its head. There's a perfect opportunity to put money to work. Perfect opportunity.
Okay. All right. And I think Kenny's right. You've got to have the plan and you've got to stick with the plan and you've got to avoid your emotions. And that's why you have to have the plan and work out the plan with an expert who's done this a long time. Find somebody with a whole lot of experience. Find a CFP. Find a CFA. Make sure they're registered and licensed. Talk to your CPA. Okay. Kenny Polcari is Chief Market Strategist for Slatestone Wealth and my great friend. Thank you, KP. Please come back soon. Coming up, folks, Mahaffee. What in the hell is going on in Washington?
Thanks for being with us on Season 9 of the FarrCast. And now, political analyst Dan Mahaffee and your host, Michael Farr.
Welcome back. Joining me now, as he does every week and has for over 8 years, now in Season 9 at the FarrCast, we have Dan Mahaffee, the president of the Dr. Scholl Foundation, a scholar for the Center of the Study of the Presidency and Congress, a Washington, D.C. think tank, and our senior political analyst here, and bringing us just lots of knowledge every week. So thank you, Dan, and welcome back.
Thank you, Michael. And yes, the FarrCast is not reliant on federal appropriations, and therefore we are open today.
We are open today, though we would accept any sort of federal dollars or monies that could come our way. An appropriation, I think, would be appropriate for the FarrCast.
Make pork great again.
Yes.
Go find our earmark.
Hey, I came up with an idea this morning. One of the Starbucks that was closed was in Rehoboth, right on Main Street, and the place was always packed with a line, and it was one of those that was cut. I want to lease the space, and I'm going to open FarrBucks. What do you think?
Perfect.
Huh? FarrBucks Coffee. It's the same space. I don't have to have good coffee. They don't. I just need to have the space and charge a lot for it. I know how to do that. All right, Mahaffee. Government is shut down. This is a hugely serious thing that will affect tens of thousands, if not over 100,000 employees, federal employees, including air traffic controllers, who I believe have to continue to work even though they may not continue to receive their paychecks during this period. Walk us through it very quickly, will you? And by the way, let's start with Greg Valliere saying it will be at least the month of October, and this day-to-day count is going to just drive you all insane. That was his opinion. So go anywhere you want there.
No, I think Greg does lay out a scenario where this does go on through the month. Both sides are appearing to dig in, and particularly, too, as the administration looks in ways we're seeing perhaps unprecedented of trying to target the pain of the shutdown, particularly to affect the states that have Democratic senators, Democratic governors, the blue states that didn't vote for him. So you see that And I think the threats as well of these layoffs of the federal workers, there are the certain categories, like you said, the air traffic controllers, the defense folks, others who are working but not getting paid. But there are plenty of others now that the administration is threatening to lay off. But what this is doing right now is making Democrats dig in. And while this is happening, look, the issue remains. There are the contours of how to get out of this. There are the discussions. Yes, there's a short-term deal to be made to keep government open and get government open so that you can then have the negotiations, frankly, to cover this Obamacare subsidies, because there are moderate Republicans as well who do not want to see these subsidies suddenly disappear and healthcare premiums suddenly rise. So there's a deal to be had there. But at the end of the day, the only person who can get the House of Representatives to go along with any Senate deal is the president himself. So this is a matter of when President Trump decides, and ultimately on him right now in this Washington, as we've talked, Michael, the dynamics of never have you had one person so dominant over what the policy outcome is. It is now up to him largely to say, what are the contours of a short-term opening that can be then used to negotiate some kind of deal on these subsidies? Because otherwise, he will be the president who, of course, will be in charge when a lot of folks, and and Steve Bannon will be someone who reminds you, there are a lot of Trump voters who are on Obamacare that will see their premiums go up next year if there is not a deal to be had. But it is the president who is the person who can bring that deal about if he's willing to. But we are not seeing that given, I think the Hakeem Jeffries and sombrero videos and that kind of nonsense. So, when the public decides where the blame is, look at who is controlling the situation now and where the pathway to a deal could be.
And while, Dan, I certainly understand that President Trump has that authority and the power to do that, will he ultimately own the culpability for not getting it done? Because he has avoided, in a Teflon way, catching the mess when it actually gets messy. So I'm not sure, and I want to also so comment on that, because I want to ask you one more question about Doge.
Michael, I agree with that, and I think we've seen that. The question is, where do you start to see the chips in the Teflon? We are seeing the independent voters who we're seeing their numbers really drop off in support of the administration. Republicans have stayed solid, of course. But on the other hand, questions about the economic record, farmers, an important part of the president's constituency, farmers are up in arms about the lack of any movement on soybeans, other deals like that. They're looking for assistance. Politics, we talk about Teflon in politics, it's there, but these things can change, in time. And as Greg will say, to the end of the month is a lifetime in politics.
In politics, it certainly is. Okay. NPR is reporting, and clearly a leftward-leaning news source, but NPR is reporting that many of the jobs that were eliminated under Doge are now being rehired because they left holes. They left vacuums that absolutely needed filling for government to function. And folks are being hired back. And that the cost savings, the theoretical cost savings that were reported, were found without foundation, and that indeed the numbers that were pared back were very small, and the numbers to repair are very high. And actually, the full effects of the Doge effort under Elon Musk is actually costing the United States hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yes, and also, frankly, Michael, to add to that, to insult to injury, there are instances, too, of many federal workers who are simply being paid to not do their jobs while the courts decide whether or not they are fired or hired. So we have people being paid by taxpayer dollars to do nothing simply while this is being resolved.
Is the NPR report accurate?
It is accurate in specific instances. Certainly, we've heard, and I've had this relayed to me, ones at the Department of Commerce, the Weather Service. Look, fires, hurricanes, tornadoes, they don't care about your philosophy of the size of government. They need, they need folks there for the forecasting, for the emergency responses. And we've seen that as one area. And there are examples of this too. And I've heard about food safety, other areas where, look, these workers do jobs that we can rail about government at times, but people want safe hamburgers. They want safe bridges, things like that.
We're still in this world of the torrent of new headlines that distract and overwhelm, and they often overwhelm and obscure and obfuscate yesterday's headlines. So it just occurs to me as we're getting hit with all of this that there's still a war going on in Ukraine. And I'm not sure anymore what weapons we're sending to NATO and the EU. And give us an update there. And when you get hit, when we continue to get hit and bombarded with this confluence of major headlines one after another, how do we keep track and how do we hold any of our publicly elected officials accountable?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Michael, the situation in Ukraine and NATO, what I'll say is, look, the disappointment with Putin seems to have continued in ways that change rhetoric when you have, look, the administration now even talking about selling Tomahawk missiles that could reach Moscow to the Ukrainians. These are things that are, definite shifts in rhetoric, but look, the administration will not be doing any of this as charity. They see this as something where NATO has to go cash and carry to get these weapons. And it's going to be a question for the Europeans. How long can they sustain support and resources for Ukraine while also planning, frankly, for their rearmament and redefense against Russia, given what they've seen with these drone incursions, the shutdowns of the airports in Denmark and Norway and other places. Things like that really have the Europeans on edge about their defense. And at a time when they're certainly worrying about the United States. And actually, in a matter of a couple of weeks, I'll be going to Japan as well to hear what they're thinking in East Asia about U.S. commitment and what they're hearing on this rhetoric.
We're gonna want that report as soon as you
Sure.
get back, Dan. Maybe Harry, we talk to Dan while he's in Japan.
Yeah, we'll find a way to do that. But to your question though about how do you keep up with this, I'm reminded this is a bit of a apocrypha, so maybe the scholars better than I can even look this up. But I remember someone telling me James Madison once believed the American Republic would not work if the average citizen got news more than once a week. That they needed a little bit of time to process things and analyze things, and that as we all know, the first reports in most instances are wrong and inaccurate, and therefore other aspects of, as we know, a lie gets twice around the world before the truth can put its pants on, all those types of things.
Yes.
In this day and age where there are so many sources, I say to folks, your information needs to be like your diet. Varied, diverse, lots of sources. No one type of junk food, no one type of junk media. Read things you disagree with, read things that make you bitter, but read a wide variety of sources, watch a wide variety of channels, and hear opposing and differing viewpoints and good debate, and you will learn the truth.
I just like hearing you try to pronounce wide variety. That's pretty. Can you do nuclear for me?
Nuclear.
Damn. Okay. Well, I had a shot. The headline in the headline in the Washington Post said today, we asked 1,000 Americans who's to blame for the shutdown. Here's what they said. It blamed the Republicans, is what the 1,000 Americans said. And I'm sitting here skeptically thinking, this is the Washington Post. Where did they find the 1,000 Americans to ask? Did they? I mean, in which states did they go into the blue states and find the 1,000 there? Did they get a real random sampling? I'm questioning all of these things because I want to know if there's bias or if I can trust this information.
Right, you have to know who are the sources, who in many cases are the owners of the networks. We saw this with the Kimmel things, who are the ones owning these syndicates and affiliates. That becomes a question as well. So all of this is what you have to consider now as you try and keep yourself informed and try and make sense of what, as you say, is a rapidly changing and sometimes frightening world.
All I can tell you is that George Will's column in the Washington Post, you can read anything you want, but just always read George Will. I just think he's that.
Yeah.
I just think he's that. Even when you disagree with George Will, his writing is so beautiful and so clever. It's just so compelling. I love it. It makes me feel happy every time I do it. All right.
And a good fellow Cubs fan. We hope they beat the Padres this afternoon.
Oh, Lord. Now it's getting ugly, folks. Getting ugly here on the FarrCast. Dan, thank you. And I also just make sure that I understand this properly. Israel, Palestine, Hamas, even though this deal is on the table right now and Hamas is supposed to be considering, I've got air quotes around that, ladies and gentlemen, considering this, Israel's going full force still into Palestine, attacking. And so Hamas, even though this agreement would mean the destruction of Hamas, Israel's going to destroy Hamas one way or the other for anybody who's not paying attention. So we can do it, my way, or we can do it my way, is what I'm seeing.
Yep.
All right, folks, that's it. For Mahaffee, we're going to come back with Leland Vittert and his new book when we come back on the FarrCast. Please stay with us.
Michael Farr and the FarrCast are proud to support Heroes, Inc. Heroes supports the spouses and children of law enforcement officers and firefighters who gave their lives in the line of duty to the greater Washington, D.C. community. Their singular goal is to honor the supreme sacrifice made by these individuals by caring for their families. Heroes' work begins within 24 hours of the tragic loss and continues indefinitely. We invite you to learn more about Heroes' mission at heroes.org. We hope that you will consider supporting Heroes as they endeavor to honor those who protect us. That's heroes.org. Heroes, here for you, here for good. And now, back to the FarrCast and your host, Michael Farr. Thank you for joining us on the FarrCast. And now, back to your host, Michael Farr.
Welcome back to the FarrCast. I am Michael Farr. Great segments today with Polcari and Mahaffee. So much going on, particularly in Washington and on Wall Street as stocks continue to soar, make new highs. The risk is there, ladies and gentlemen. Complacency is not your friend, I promise. Just because it feels good doesn't mean you should be doing it in the stock market, I promise. Caution, ladies and gentlemen, caution. Okay, we have a great treat now, great treat. First time on the FarrCast, my great friend Leland Vittert. He is the senior Washington anchor for News Nation. He is the host now for a number of years of On Balance with Leland Vittert. It's on at 9 p.m. East Coast time. And I think, he says so, but I agree with him, the fairest shows on television. Fairest shows on television. We're going to ask Leland, ladies and gentlemen, to do two things today. One, he's got a brand new book out that has already sold out. It's already sold out on Amazon twice. This is an amazing book, and we're going to talk about the book first, and then I'm going to get, as the Washington anchor for News Nation and a former Fox News anchor, I want to talk about his perspective, what's going on in Washington, particularly in the Middle East. He was a correspondent and a war correspondent in the Middle East, and he has interviewed some of the leaders, world leaders in the Middle East and across Europe, can bring us some really terrific insights. But before I bury the lead, his new book is called Born Lucky. And the timing on this is impeccable. Lucky was born, had a difficult birth. He didn't speak until he was, after 3 years. He didn't talk for 3 years. He is on the spectrum, has autism. And can you imagine that someone with autism and difficulty reading social cues ended up as a war correspondent in the Middle East, where you have to survive and make sure, somebody's looking at you the wrong way and doesn't shoot you? I can't. And that he has become a very dear friend of mine makes me so happy I didn't know him back then, because I would have been worried out of my damn mind. Anyway, with all of that, we're going to ask him about this great book that chronicles his childhood and wonderful relationship with his father. Leland Vittert, welcome to the FarrCast.
Well, long-time listener, first-time caller, Michael. Thank you very much. It's good to be here. And I should tell your listeners that Born Lucky, yes, sold out twice on Amazon in 48 hours. We've had to double the printing of it and double it again. So it has struck a chord about giving hope to parents of kids who are having a hard time. Every parent who has a kid who's having a hard time, Michael, you know from having read the book, this book speaks to. It gives you real things you can do. It gives you real hope. It shows your kid that middle school is hell, but it's great training for a Washington newsroom, and then it's over. And I think what your listeners should know most of all is that this book would not have happened without Michael Farr. So if you read the book, go to Amazon, buy Born Lucky as you're listening to this podcast. And if you don't like the book, email Michael Farr.
Michael Farr,
yes,
that's right.
Yes, because Michael Farr was the guy who really pushed me to tell this story of growing up and the difficulties of it, and to share some really dark moments in the hope that it would help other folks. So I think we did, as you predicted, Michael, we did well.
It is a great book. When I read it, and I told you this, and I read it several times as he was writing it, and I made suggestions here and there. Now, if there are parts you don't like, those are probably the suggestions that I made that he ignored. But the really good parts would be my suggestion. But I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I knew Lucky's story. His nickname is Lucky, and we're going to tell you why in just a second. I knew Lucky's story. I know Lucky's parents. They are dear friends. And I cried 4 or 5 times as I read this book. I laughed out loud at a couple of different places that were just absolutely perfect. But it's a touching story. And I think what you said there, Leland, as we started was, and yes, it's Leland and Lucky. Those are the Lucky's his nickname. Sorry, I don't mean to confuse anybody. But this is not just about people with autism and on the spectrum. This is any kid who's struggling. Right. It could be struggling with a learning disability. Could just be struggling socially.
Yep.
Now, my sisters will swear to you that I had at least several learning disabilities, and they have a list of problems they keep track of that I have. They're sure, all of which are undiagnosed. But I certainly struggled through middle school, as most children struggle through middle school. How, Lucky, talk about what your father and mother did to help you survive what's a difficult time for any teen, preteen, adolescent, but the extra help that you particularly needed.
There were a few things. One, my dad quit his job when I was 5 to, in his words, be my friend, because he said, I realized you wouldn't have any friends, so maybe I could be your friend. And he was, but he was my friend, he was my coach, he was my mentor. And there were a few things, self-esteem was earned, not given. So he tried to find ways for me to gain self-esteem and achievement outside of school, athletics, or friends, which was started with doing 200 push-ups a day, because push-ups just require hard work. They don't require any kind of innate athletic ability.
200 push-ups a day? Wait, how old were you when you were doing 200 push-ups a day?
This is 5, 6, 7.
No way.
I wouldn't try to do 200 push-ups today. But it started with that. And if you did that for 5 days a week for 3 months, then you got something special. But it was a way to try to give me self-esteem that was earned, because self-esteem that is just handed to you doesn't matter. And that's one of the lessons in the book that's so different and counter to what we hear now, and especially what parents are told these days, and especially what parents of kids who are having a hard time are told these days. But those data points from my dad, and Michael, I'm sure you and my dad have had these conversations before, but I didn't know this. He didn't tell anybody about my diagnosis. He didn't tell anybody about the struggles I was having or the struggles he was having. And by that, I mean that in 7th grade, I was going to a new school. I'd been taken out of a couple of schools because I'd been bullied so badly. And my parents get called into the principal's office 2 weeks in. So you can imagine what any parents thinking getting called in. What's wrong? What's going on? They're crushed because they thought this was going to be a fresh start. And the principal looks at my parents and says, everybody at this school thinks Lucky is really weird. And frankly, I do too. So
wait. The head of school said that?
The head of the middle school, yeah.
Said that about a child. How old were you?
7th grade.
Great. They're sensitive for you.
Yeah. And then 8th grade, the teachers didn't particularly like me. One art teacher didn't think I was going to be Picasso. And he said in front of the entire class to me, "Hey, Vittert, if my dog was as ugly as you, I'd shave its ass and make it walk backwards." So
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So
the teacher said that in front of the class.
Yeah.
And you were what, 13?
13, 14. So it gives you a sense of what my parents were up against, not just up against the kids who were bullies, but the adults who were bullies too. But like most days, I went home that day, 4:20 in the afternoon. I'd walk home. I'd come to the driveway, and there would be my dad waiting for me every day. He waited every day. And he basically spent the next however long putting me back together every night. And what I didn't know, Michael, until we wrote this book, because he didn't tell me anything, nor anybody else, is oftentimes after he'd leave my room, I'd spend a couple hours crying and being angry and on. He would walk downstairs in our house and sit in the living room by himself in the dark, and he would cry himself.
It's incredible. It's an incredible story of a parent's love for a child and the difference that it makes. I want to shift. We've already gone long, but let me just tell you, ladies and gentlemen, if George Will wrote the foreword for this book, it's fabulous. It's a fabulous book. It is so well written. It's a great page turner, and it's one of these books that's clearly an autobiography, but it's a story where you're turning the pages and saying, I got to find out what happens next. You don't want to get up and go get your dinner out of the oven. You're afraid something might happen while you're gone. You want to see what happens next. It's that kind of a book. So it's called Born Lucky. Give me a little bit of advice, you think, and insights to parents who are trying to work with their kids, and give us a word to the children who are struggling.
No, I think
might share with them.
It's a great question, Michael. And this book is my story. It's not a prescription. It's not a cure. It is just my story. And I think what I can say is the best advice is my father's afterward. Which you encouraged him so much to write. And I think that is where the real advice is. I'll let people read that and take it for themselves.
I threatened to write it for him. I said, if you don't write it, Mark, I'm going to write it and we're going to sign your name to it. And I think he believed me.
So therefore it inspired him to write it. Yes. But the afterword that Dad did is just incredible. More importantly, you asked about what kids are, any advice for kids. So since it's a parenting book written by a kid, I don't feel competent enough to offer parents advice, but I can say to kids definitively, it gets better. And what my dad always told me was the qualities and character and personality you have that is going to make you, or making you at the time, bullied, isolated, crushed in middle school is what's going to make you successful later in life. And there's a lot of truth to that. And as I said, it's also what allows you to survive a Washington newsroom. And that also is, I think, part of the lesson, right? Is that understandably, so many parents want to take away obstacles for their kids and they want to just make it an easy path. And partly it's making an easy path on the kid, but it's also making it an easy path on the parents, because the easier it is for the kid, the easier it is for the parents. And my dad didn't believe that. He made me face the adversity head on every day, but he held my hand while I did it. And that obviously took an enormous amount of extra work by him and emotion and difficulty. But I think both of us would tell you it was worth it.
No question that both of you have told me that. And evidence of your life, your career, your success, your character, and your sense of integrity that just consistently points to true north, and your father's lessons of encouragement to absolutely pursue that which requires integrity and to never actually uh, be cowed by hard work. The hard work doesn't matter; it's the results. And boy, I've had these wonderful chats with Leland's dad too. Leland, I know Harry's going to have to cut here for us at different points. Please talk to me about what's going on in Washington with this shutdown. My friend Greg Valliere wrote this morning, this will last the entire month of October at the very least. And it doesn't look like it's going to end particularly well. I read in your notes yesterday that not one of these shutdowns has ended well in the court of public opinion, at least for Republicans. They've lost all of them in the public opinion. What did you mean by that? And do you think Valliere's right? It could go on for over a month?
If you want to be proven stupid, predict the future in the Middle East or what's going to happen now when Donald Trump is president, because who knows? So I won't make predictions. I will say I think there is a chance that this might be the first shutdown that Democrats got too far out over their skis on, because their messaging is really convoluted, and for the first time, Republicans are playing by Democrats' rules, and
Republicans are playing by Democrats' rules. What do you mean by that?
I mean that when you're seeing the messaging around this, Republicans normally are the ones who want to shut the government down. This time around, it's Democrats who are trying to hold the government funding hostage to extract something. Now, those are just the facts. And they can say, well, we're trying to protect this and we're trying to do that. And I think there's a chance it's not going to work out well. And if you've watched even today, Republicans, I think, have won most of the big brawls on cable news. And also, unlike in 2019 and 18 and all the other times before that when Republicans lost, Republicans have a lot more power in the media now. There's a much greater interest by the networks to be fair. And there's podcasts, there's social media, there's all sorts of other places that people are getting their news and that Republicans can get their message out.
Okay. So how does this end up? Lucky, where does this end up? They come up with some sort of CR. Do the Democrats get any concessions for health care and the other priorities they've listed?
I don't see them getting any concessions. Now, the flip side to this, right, is that Democrats want nothing more right now and need nothing more than to show their base that they are fighting Trump. It does well for fundraising. It does well for primaries. That's what the base wants, is to fight Donald Trump. So that may be something they get. I mean, that may be enough. I don't see that being enough, but I've been wrong before.
Shift over to the Middle East, would you please? Benjamin Netanyahu seems to have agreed with the president's plan, and yet he's been very clear that if the plan is rejected by Hamas, we're going to keep fighting and we're going to just go, no holds barred. What does that mean? What do you think happens there? What is Netanyahu doing?
Well, Netanyahu is doing invariably what is in Benjamin Netanyahu's best interest. And he has been for a very long time, which is who he is. I don't see how Hamas accepts this plan, because essentially Hamas is agreeing to its own destruction with this plan. And for a genocidal group of theocratic maniacs.
Oh, tell us how you really think, would you?
Well, it's actually interesting. One of the biggest parts of the book that is not really about my upbringing is my time in the Middle East. That part has gone absolutely gangbusters on social media. A couple of stories from my times in the Middle East, including when I interviewed a failed suicide bomber. But that's exactly how I feel. And I don't really see Hamas giving up. And I think that means that this peace plan is not going to work. And then Netanyahu will have carte blanche from Trump.
Netanyahu has carte blanche from Trump, and he gets to do whatever he wants.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. All right. Uh, and then could we be out of this in a year?
Look, the one thing to always remember in the Middle East is things change, right? So in 2010, when I headed to the Middle East, and I write about this in Born Lucky, the reason I got the opportunity at 28 to be a foreign correspondent was because nobody wanted the job in Israel for Fox News, because the Middle East was peaceful. Obama had just gone to Cairo and declared peace and said everything was going to be great and said, we're going to make friends with the Muslim world. And Hillary was going to negotiate this deal between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and everything was going to be fantastic. And then the Arab Spring happened 6 months later. So the one rule in the Middle East is things change. I would just say, I think that what we've seen over the past 2 years, we're coming up on the second anniversary of October 7th, that the Middle East has gotten a lot safer. Hezbollah is gone. Hamas is severely degraded. The Houthis have been rightly put in their place. The Iranian militias in Iraq are almost destroyed. And the U.S. and Israel proved that they can reach out and touch Iran in any way they want and destroy much of Iran's nuclear program. If 2 years ago, when October 7th had happened, you would have predicted this at the end, 2 years later, with relatively little Israeli casualties. I mean, there have been, there was 1,200 on October 7th. There's been about 1,000 Israeli soldiers killed. But without a major war and major destruction of Israeli infrastructure because of Hezbollah or Iran, people would have called you crazy.
Does Israel turn its attention back to Iran and sort of go in and finish the job?
Oh boy, that's a much harder question. And I think it's one that requires a lot more understanding of what's happening inside Iran than what we have, because I think the Israelis have such a better insight into Iran, and it's so well penetrated by them that it wouldn't surprise me if it never happened, and it wouldn't surprise me if tomorrow things started blowing up in Tehran.
Right. I mean,
they clearly
they had a drone base in Iran.
Well, they did. I don't think they do anymore.
Oh, okay, but they still snuck one in there.
Right.
Their knowledge and mastery of the region's pretty darn impressive. Okay, I've learned a lot today. Thank you. Will you please come back? I've got so much more. I want to talk to you about China. I want to talk to you about Russia. I want to find out. I've got all sorts of questions.
I do, and here's why, Michael, and your listeners, especially in Washington, will like this, is because Winston Churchill once said that politics is the second oldest profession, and it closely resembles the first.
Yes.
And I think you know this as an author yourself. Book sales is the third oldest profession, and it closely resembles the first two. So the book is Born Lucky. It's available on Amazon until it sells out again, and I will come back anytime.
That's wonderful. I'm telling you, folks, do yourselves a favor. Read this book. It will lift your spirits, and it'll make you believe in things that you weren't sure were possible. I can't think of a better book, anything, or a better task or goal or credit for any book ever. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for another FarrCast as we cover Wall Street, Washington, and the world, bringing you insiders to better understand what's going on in the world, in economics, on Wall Street, and how it's all going to affect your investment discipline. Stay disciplined. We've learned a lot this week. We'll be back again next week. Do it all again. For Hightower, Farr, Miller in Washington, my producer, Harry Jennings, thanks so much for being with us. I'm Michael Farr. See you next week.
And that's a wrap for this week's episode. Thanks to this week's guest, Kenny Polcari, Dan Mahaffee, and special guest, Leland Vittert. And thanks to you, our listeners. We hope that you share us with friends and colleagues. The FarrCast is produced by Michael Farr and Harry Jennings and comes to you weekly for free on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and TuneIn. Please be aware that any time we or any of our guests mention a specific company, sector, or refer to performance in relation to an earnings report, news headline, or economic trend, it is not a recommendation to buy or sell. Review the risks and rewards of any investment with your financial advisor for what specific investment and general strategy is appropriate for you before you make any investment decision. And if we can be of assistance here at Farr, Miller in Washington, please reach out to me at hjennings@farrmiller.com. We are here to help, and I'll be happy to put you in touch with one of our investment professionals to help you navigate your financial course across the changing investing landscape. We are grateful for all of your notes and comments, and we try to respond to as many as we can. Please keep those emails and messages coming. We'll be back with you next week. Until then, take care, stay safe, and stay healthy. And thank you for listening to the FarrCast. Wall Street, Washington, and the world. Farr, Miller & Washington is a group comprised of investment professionals registered with Hightower Advisors, LLC, and a SEC-registered investment advisor. Some investment professionals may also be registered with Hightower Securities, LLC, member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services are offered through Hightower Advisors, LLC. Securities are offered through Hightower Securities, LLC. All information referenced herein is from sources believed to be reliable. Farr, Miller & Washington and Hightower Advisors, LLC have not independently verified the accuracy or completeness of the information contained in this podcast. Farr, Miller & Washington and Hightower Advisors, LLC and any of its affiliates make no representations or warranties, expressed or implied, as to the accuracy or completeness of the information or for statements or errors or omissions or results obtained from the use of this information. Farr, Miller & Washington and Hightower Advisors, LLC and any of its affiliates assume no liability for any action made or taken in reliance on or relating in any way to the information. This podcast and the materials contained herein were created for informational purposes only. The opinions expressed are solely those of the authors and do not represent those of Hightower Advisors, LLC or any of its affiliates. Farr, Miller & Washington and Hightower Advisors, LLC or any of its affiliates do not provide tax or legal advice. This material was not intended or written to be used or presented in any way to any entity as tax or legal advice. Clients are urged to consult their tax and/or legal advisors for related questions.